Welcome back, MTG Joe here. We're here for another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This particular video will be for standard best of one. As always, if you're looking for our best of three formats, Explorer, Historic, check out the video playlist. You can catch that. We try to cover each of them per week. We'll also do, if there's any sort of arena events for the weekend, try to highlight deck lists there. So if it's qualifier play-in that we have, we'd like this month's Explorer. We did that, like metagame challenges, anything like that, we do that on the channel. As always, we get the data from Untapped.gg, the companion tool that runs alongside your Arena client, aggregates win rate data for all the players, and then gives us these statistics, can also track your own win rates, stuff like that. Really helpful tool, link is in the video description if you want to get started with that. I will paste all these deck lists in the video description. A couple quick things before we jump into this. We're still on our quest for 10,000 subs on the channel, where we cracked 8,000. So if you haven't subbed, click the sub buttons, free, easy, helps the channel. Likes and comments also greatly appreciated to help the channel out. And I mentioned this a couple times already on my socials, but all the money I make from YouTube for the month of April, I am donating it to Toronto, Canada-based food banks. So I'm taking all the money and donating it to people that are hungry, need food, need support. The economy is kind of garbage right now. So trying to take all that and donate to help people out. So if you want to help out, just run my videos, watch my videos. If you're doing something else, you have another screen open, throw on one of my videos, let it run. Every minute counts, it adds up, it gets more revenue generated, and I'm donating everything. I'll do updates once a week with this or so, just showing how we're tracking, but I'm hoping the goal is at least like 500 bucks, hopefully. So if you can do that, it's greatly appreciated. Takes nothing out of you. I'm not asking for donations, anything like that. But all the revenue I generate from YouTube will be donated this month. So jumping into it, we are looking March 25th through April 1st. April Fool's Day is here, and Diamond to Mythic rank, 140,000 games of Magic played. We are looking at Diamond to Mythic right now, in part because the ladder just reset, so a couple of these days, folks that were Mythic have been downgraded to Platinum, so it's usually not as much congregated volume of data at the Mythic rank. So we're going to jump into it, and I also featured some folks asked for some more fringy decks if possible, maybe not the highest win rates. So I curated and I took a look to see if there's anything in addition that kind of stood out, kind of a fresh new standard deck. So looking at it, we got Selesnya Toxic as the top win rate deck of the week, 64.5%, 65% win rate. And they went back to the Bloated Contaminators and Eccentury main. They were playing that 3 mana instant that made 2 mites or dealt damage. Usually the kind of variance with this, and we're seeing 2 ossifications in this particular deck. Sometimes you'll see Soul Partition, sometimes you just see the full playset of Skrelv's Hives. You see maybe like an extra Tamiyo safekeeping or like the full set of Skrelvs. I don't like ossification because the mana base forces you to play more basics. You're still playing a number of non-basics, so 13 out of your 23 lands are non-basics, so this could just be dead at times. Soul Partition, it also can be used defensively on your own creatures and then trigger Rot Priest, which I like. So I would probably opt to not go ossification. That way you can play a full playset of Seed Core and then like 2 to 3 copies of the Myrex. So just have much better utility lands in your mana base. But the core of this deck is to try to toxic out your opponent. So you have kind of the jank win with Venerated Rot Priest and like targeting it with spells like Tamiyo Safekeeping, Tyvar Stand. You could target any of your creatures. And then you also just have the creature combat. All the creatures in this deck are both Phyrexians, and they are also have Toxic in some account. So like the Slaughter Singer is a Lord effect for your Toxic creatures, Toxic 2, Jawbone Duelist Toxic, Toxic, Toxic Protection, Toxic Proliferate. So you just a lot of ways to kind of do that. You have the utility lands to pump your team, and then you have Skrelv's Hive that gives you a new creature every turn. And then once your opponent's corrupted, 3 or more poison, you're able to gain lifelink, which will help you race against, say, the next opponent or the next deck, the mono Red Aggro. So this is 63.6, so 64%. So this deck's been fairly static in terms of like the configuration. The core of the decks remain. We're seeing a copy of a Braid come in the main board now. Just another removal spell with some flexibility to hit artifacts if needed. A singular Shivan Devastator. We've seen in past this be another copy of Strangle. We've seen it be a 4th copy of Feldon as well in terms of the Abrade. So just kind of mixing up some of the spells in here. But this deck's looking to go fast, hit hard. A bunch of 1-drops, so Kumano pings, pumps, and 2/2 creature with like death equals exile. Swiftspear with prowess and haste. Haste and comes back from the graveyard with the little chick. Play with fires, and then strangles, braids, lightning strike, all a bunch of burn-based removal, or some of them could go face. Shivan Devastator is kind of you ideally want it late game. That's why you're playing 1. You want it to kind of be like your X equals 3, X equals 4, flying haste, smack them in the face kind of deal. Copies of Squee as well as Thundering Raiju. In best of 3 at least, we've seen a lot of the decks go down on number of Squees and instead play Furnace Punisher, the 3-mana 3/3 menace that deals 2 damage to each player on their upkeep if they don't have 2 or more basics. We do see more of a shift of like Esper Legends and then the Grixis piles and like the multi-mana based decks, so it hurts them more. There's still a good number because like even if we look at the Toxic deck, in terms of non-basics, it's still like over half. And this version's playing a little bit higher in terms of the basics there. It's also evasive, Squee comes back, so kind of to your discretion of what you're seeing in the mana. This version's on 22 lands, 3 Mishras, 2 Sokuzans, and then Thundering Raijus on the top end. Next deck up is Azorius Soldiers, 62%. Another deck that's got some variations, and it's usually in the 3-drop slot. We've seen some of them at times play Skrelv as well for a protection spell, but Valiant Veteran's your Lord, Harbin's your kind of Anthem effect if you can attack with 5 or more. Resolute Reinforcements goes wide, Thalia's attacks. Recruitment Officers, your early game beater, that late game you can sink mana and draw some cards with it, which is nice. Yodian's kind of pumps and then can come back from the graveyard with haste. Removal with Brutal Cathar. Siege Veteran to put counters on things and pump things up. And then Sky Strike Officer to make tokens and draw you cards. Myrel makes you a bunch of tokens and then kind of forces your opponent's play at sorcery speed, which is nice. The mana base with Soldiers is nice because you have Fortified Beachhead. This version of the deck should at least be playing like another copy of Adhikar Waste. I would probably still play some copies of the Fastland as well, Secluded Glen, I think, or whatever it's called, the blue-white Fastland. But that's kind of my preference with the deck, just to have more basics, because you only really need at most 1 basic island. You're going to run into instances where you have a lot of basics here that doesn't really support such a heavy white-based mana base, because you really only have 2 blue pips in the entire deck. Moving on, we have a new deck, Golgari Fight Club, Golgari Rigging. So this is 62% win rate deck. So this deck's looking to use Fight Rigging to put counters on a creature, have 7 or more power on said creature, and then cheat into play something big. So how are you doing this? Well, you have things like Shakedown Heavy, which comes down, 6 power, puts a counter, gets it right away. You have Archfiend of Dross, which can be played after the Fight Rigging. And then what you're trying to cheat into play, ideally, Gix Command, Invoke Despair, or Tyrannix Rex. A big chunky 8/8 can't be countered, trample, ward, haste, toxic, smack you in the face type of creature. The rest of the deck kind of piecing things together. You have Glissa, which is just a really efficient creature, does a whole bunch of different things in terms of drawing new cards, blowing up enchantments, removing counters. Notably, you don't want to remove the counters from your Archfiend of Dross, because when it runs out of oil counters, you die. And then just makes combat really awkward with First Strike and Death Touch. 7 pieces of removal early, some Rampant Armored Scrap Gorger, and then Tenacious D to come back from the graveyard. I think it's a little ambitious to be running 3 copies of the Myrex in an Invoke Despair deck. This deck's also already having to play things like Jungle Hollow because there's no Fastland. To be honest, instead of Jungle Hollow, you're better off playing a Triome, one of the cycle lands, just because you get the added utility late game to cycle if needed. I would probably only play maybe 1 or 2 of these. You don't want to have a bunch of these non-colored when you're trying to cast like double black, quad black, triple green, and then you have this kind of hanging out in your mana base. We then move on to Gruul Aggro. So 61%. So this is like modified oil aggro creatures turned sideways. So this is a deck that you kind of dump your initial hand and hope they don't have a lot of interaction and you can win. Got 1-drops, Innocent and Pack Leader that could get bigger when you cast 4 drops. Evolving Adaptive is kind of the experiment one. Gets bigger for each creature with power toughness bigger. And then you put oil counters, and then it gets plus bonus on that. You have Kumano to ping, and then put counters. Play with fire as your burn and kind of early removal. Hajar to protect your legendaries. It's also just a 3/3 for 2, which is good stats. Beast Caller gets bigger when you cast more creatures, and then you can redistribute those counters to other creatures. Iconoclast, 2 mana, 3/2 trample. That can also be kicked with haste and a power boost for the turn. Loaded Contaminator, so you can put extra oil counters, +1/1 counters, whatever it may be on creatures. And then just, 3 mana, 4/4 trample could smash face. You got Miglos, which sees play in Explorer and Pioneer as well in the Gruul Boats decks. Another card with the modified kind of theme with the oil counters, and you can remove oil counters to either give it Vigilance and Menace, give it plus some power, or blow up artifacts or enchantments. You have Halana and Alana partners to give a power boost and haste to any subsequent creature, and then Thundering Raiju. So oil counters do count as modified. So even though they don't have +1/1 counters with Raiju, it still counts as modified, so you still deal damage to your opponent that way. You have utility in the fact that there's now 8 untapped lands, which helps this deck have, because you're running basically 8 red 1-drops and then 6 green 1-drops, so you want untapped land of dual colors on the early turns. Moving on, we go to Mono White Aggro, 61% win rate. So this is the aggressive version of the deck with Phyrexian Vindicator featured in it. So this is kind of your top end reward of going mono white, is you get a 5/5 flying that when it's dealt damage, you just redirect it and make your opponent cry. Otherwise, it's just very efficient mono white creatures. A lot of them see play in extended formats like Explorer and Pioneer. Hopeful Initiate gets bigger when you attack, and you can remove counters to blow up artifacts or enchantments. Lay Down Arms exiles creature equal to the number of planes. You got 22 of them, so just flexible removal. You pair that with Brutal Cathar as additional removal as well. Skrelv as a way to give protection and pseudo unblockable. Guardian Nubenalia is a harder to kill creature that can enlist other creatures. Intrepid Adversary is your Lord effect in the deck, as well as just being a lifelinker can help. Thalia for tax, Adeline for go wide bodies, and just a big creature. And then your Steel Seraph's really a 3-drop in this deck. Gives you a bonus in terms of flying, vigilance, or lifelink. I think just a big lifelink Adeline or flying Adeline works really nice. Or Vigilance Vindicator. You attack in and then you can also hold it back on defense. Mana base very simple, 2 Ejanjos, and then 22 planes. Moving on, we go to Selesnya Enchantments. So this had a comeback. Pascal Maynard, I believe, at the Ottawa, Canada RC, had a good run in best of 3 with enchantments. So we're seeing kind of a return of it. So this is the more aggressively slanted version. There's the Saga-based version with Rite of Harmony as well, but this version is looking to use Weaver of Harmony to double your enter the battlefield triggers, and also gives your other enchantment creatures a bonus in terms of power. So you can draw 2. The first 2 chapters you can get double bonus. Jukai just becoming a cost reduction for your enchantments, as well as lifelink. If your circle comes in or your Borrowed Time, you can exile 2 things with it. Commune helps you dig. Fanga Shigeki, just a Death Toucher. Enchantment creature, Generous Visitor, you can throw counters on things based on whenever you cast enchantments. And then your Hallowed Haunting rewards you for casting enchantments by making more bodies in terms of spirits that get scalable and bigger. And then also if you have 7 or more enchantments, lets you get flying for your creatures and vigilance. Catilda gets bigger and has lifelink and flying, and then also allows you to flash it back for its disturbed cost. Mana base has been updated nicely for this deck as well. Then we move to Mono Black Control, Mono Black Invoke, Mono Black Midrange, whatever you want to call it. It is Mono Black, all the busted cards. So this is your Invoke Despair version, Shieldred, Sorin, kind of on the top of the 4-drop slot. 3 Lilianas, 4 Graveyard Trespassers. Usually the more aggressive versions will play Gix at times or Phyrexian Flesh Gorger. This version, go for the throat, don't play Infernal Grasp. This card's kind of phased out. The meta is very aggressive, so you don't want to be taking 2 damage. Tenacious Underdogs to come back, Bankbuster for card advantage, just a bunch of removal, March of the Wretched Sorrow for some lifelink, Curtains as an early blocker that can attack your opponent's hand, and then Evolve Sweeper as a mana sink. In terms of the mana base, it's all black mana. I've seen some of these versions either play where'd it go? Where did it go? Mishra's Foundry. As a mana, they could play the Myrex as well, just some utility land if the game goes late. And then lastly, Boros Control. This was a deck that showed up last week. Was the top deck last week at 60-odd%. I'm actually curious if we just switch to Mythic, if it's got a higher win rate. No. So this one last week had fairly reasonable win rate. I played it as well. I think I went like 2-0 with it or 3-0. Let's see. 2-0. The games are pretty long. I ran into blue-white control and mono-black. The deck felt pretty strong, all things considered. Nice little like flash elements with Cathar Commando. Probably don't need Light Up the Night, but I'd probably just some earlier aggression. Maybe like another Wedding Announcement, but it's just a bunch of good cards backed up with Planeswalkers. It's a Boros deck, but you're splashing black for Archangel of Wrath. But having access to sweepers, we've seen a lot of these aggressive decks thus far, just kind of full to sweepers. You have Farewell on the top end, Sanctuary Warden, good Planeswalkers to back you up as well. Fable, Wedding Announcement, Bankbuster for card advantage. Cathar Commando surprises attackers. Also can just blow up like opponents' Bankbusters, anything of that nature. And then just like some burn removal of the Populate hidden in there as well. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing. If you like the structure with kind of some more fringe decks included in here. The new set is coming out in a couple weeks. We've been getting a lot of spoilers. I should be hopefully invited again. I've been invited to the last few early access events. So we'll be able to test out a bunch of decks during that time as well. And like I said, just to reiterate, all the funds, all the revenue, any penny I make from YouTube this month of April, I will be donating it all to charity, to a food bank in my city. So if you want to help out, like I said, just run my videos. It just helps. The more watch time we get, the more money I can generate, the more I can give away to a worthy cause. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one. Stay safe out there.